Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
The game may have ended 0-0, but it still showed why Arsenal and Newcastle are right up the table, with Arteta's constant creative attempts at problem solving, while Howe and Newcastle had a frankly beautiful defensive system. But what exactly were the tactics from both managers? Let's take a closer look. And we'll look at Arsenal in possession and how Newcastle defended so well. And a lot of you have been asking what software I use for my analysis, and it's called Once Video Analyzer Pro. And it's already pretty affordable, but I've teamed up with them to give any of you who want to try it a further 10% off by using the code FMS10. So visit their website through the link in the description below if you're interested. And initially, Newcastle started with a 4-3-3 or 4-5-1 that was quite aggressive in the press. But as the game settled and Arsenal did break the press a couple of times, Newcastle began to drop off slightly, operating in a much deeper or mid-block in a definite 4-5-1 with Almiron and Joe Linton a lot lower on the pitch. And early on, the front five was the same as usual for Arsenal, with Xhaka and Odegaard pushing up into the half spaces, allowing the wingers to stay much wider. But where in many matches, we would immediately see White and Zinchenko looking to invert alongside Partey, initially, both of the fullbacks began much wider, more as traditional fullbacks. And this did for the most part play into Newcastle's hands, as with the midfield five, they could still easily cover the men in the half spaces, while still also covering the width of the pitch, meaning that these wide fullbacks could still be covered. It also meant that when Partey did receive the ball in the midfield, he could be somewhat disconnected from his fellow midfielders, and it would take an amazing progressive pass to be able to find them between the lines. So the Arsenal midfield often found themselves in this position. And with Newcastle's midfield five spread well across the pitch, it would be extremely difficult to find the progressive passes. But here is where we begin to see the beauty and discipline of Newcastle's defensive structure. They knew that Partey, with enough time in these situations, would still be able to find that line-breaking pass to find Arsenal in more dangerous positions, or even switches out to the wingers, allowing them to be in 1-versus-1 positions out wide. So Howe knew it was important for the man on the ball to always be under pressure. So when Partey received, Bruno from defensive midfield would immediately look to press him as often as possible, and in this same instance, Willock and Longstaff would tuck in, whilst Joe Linton and Almiron would do the same, while still looking to cover the passes into the fullbacks in the wider regions. And this pressure on Partey would often force him to go backwards. Partey is initially in space, but as soon as he receives and looks to pass, Bruno is on him, whilst the midfield four begins to compact, so that Newcastle have fluidly evolved to a 4-4-1-1. But it didn't end there, as when Partey did go backwards, it was often to one of the centre-backs, and depending on the side that the ball did go to, either Willock or Longstaff would look to press the centre-back, again keeping them under pressure and forcing them backwards or into riskier passes. Gabriel's on the ball, and Longstaff is closing down his passing options. And not only is it difficult for the centre-back to make a line-breaking pass, it is also highly risky to attempt, as if they lose the ball in this position, Wilson would potentially be able to run in behind that space. So most centre-backs would play it safe and look to play backwards. But crucially, Newcastle never got drawn into this trap, where Guimaraes would be pressing Partey would go backwards to a centre-back, and Longstaff would then press, as this would leave a gaping hole in the midfield that Arsenal could take advantage of. Instead, whenever Bruno did press, Longstaff would remain deeper in order to cover him, and once the ball did go out wide to a centre-back in a deeper zone, Longstaff didn't press until Bruno had recovered his midfield position, and then he could look to be aggressive, so that Newcastle always maintained a compact four in the midfield. Initially, the whole Newcastle midfield is deep, but Partey is about to receive, which naturally means that Bruno will be out towards him, and Longstaff has come in narrower to maintain compactness. Partey finds Gabriel, but Longstaff has still maintained his position deep, because Bruno is still higher up. He still hasn't pressed because Bruno is still high up, and only when Bruno has refound his position do we see Longstaff then look to apply the pressure, while still keeping Xhaka in his cover shadow. And we will be looking at what Arteta did to make Arsenal much more dangerous in a minute, but let's touch on one other impressive facet of Howe's defense. Arsenal's 5-versus-4 shape does mean they have an advantage against the Newcastle back line, so they could often be dragged across the pitch, leaving a man free on the far side, to potentially then receive a switch. The most common way that teams adapt to this is by switching to a pseudo back five that involves the fullback moving into this position and the winger becoming a wingback so that they're never overloaded in this situation. But the problem with this, particularly if White was wide, is that it would then force Willock out of position and they would lose some of their midfield compactness in these zones. So what we did instead see is that Joe Linton tended to stay high up on White, with Burn maintaining his position as the fullback. And when Odegaard looked to make the dangerous runs into these vacated spaces, Willock was very disciplined and would always look to follow the man, so that there was still a man versus man situation, still ensuring that they were hard to overload in the central zone. So Joe Linton is on White, and Willock has already spotted the danger in behind him. So when Saka receives, Willock is well positioned to drop into the back five. But from this zone, he can still then easily look to press if needed. So how did Arteta respond to all of this? What we did see at times is that when Partey did get on the ball and Bruno as usual was looking to press him, Nketiah looked to drop into that space created in order to drag a centre-back out of position, potentially creating room for runners, although this didn't lead to chances in this match. But the real key for Arteta was Zinchenko, who began to spend less time starting out wide and instead became the second pivot alongside Partey. This gave Arsenal advantages because of the technical ability of Zinchenko, but also the tactical impact. Firstly, when Zinchenko was wide in these situations, when Gabriel was on the ball, the connection was only between him and Xhaka, so Longstaff could cover Xhaka and press Gabriel using his cover shadow. But now with Zinchenko deep, new angles could at times be created, meaning that if Longstaff did press Zinchenko, there was the potential for Gabriel to then find a man. But aside from that, even in 1 versus 1 situations, Zinchenko was an upgrade in terms of line breaking on Gabriel. So when Longstaff pressed, Zinchenko had the technical ability to create space, which was paired with Xhaka now looking to create more angles behind Longstaff. So even under pressure, Zinchenko had the ability to still find a line breaking pass, be it to Xhaka or even at times to Nketiah, and this would often get Arsenal into much more dangerous positions. So here, Longstaff is initially in a great position to cover Zinchenko and Xhaka. But Zinchenko is calm in possession and drags Longstaff across the pitch. A quick turn then opens up the smallest gap that Zinchenko can exploit. And now Arsenal are in behind the Newcastle midfield. The fluidity of Arsenal's front five was also dangerous, as Zinchenko could go wide at times, but we also saw Nketiah and Xhaka either rotating or both looking to overload the left half space, meaning that if Longstaff was looking to cover one of the lanes into these men, a momentary passing lane would open up into the other, creating danger. So here, both men are in the half space, so Gabriel is then able to find the ball into Nketiah. It was a highly interesting chess match between these two sides, with both of them showing their tactical arsenal, and in the end, a draw seems about fair. Both sides are still in excellent positions, and I want to know where you think both sides will end up come the end of the season. For the tactical score, both managers did well, but Howe's defensive system was highly effective, earning him an 8, whilst Arteta didn't do anything particularly poorly, but struggled with chance creation, earning him a 6.5. But drop your ratings down below.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.